The marketplace smelled of smoke, sweat, and fear. The cages lined both sides of the narrow street, each filled with beings from different corners of the galaxy. Loud voices filled the air as traders shouted prices, buyers bargained, and slaves cried for freedom. In the center of it all stood a small cage. Inside it sat a girl with pale silver skin and eyes like broken glass. Unlike the others, she did not cry. She did not beg. She did not even look up when people stopped to inspect her. She stayed still, hands folded in her lap, lips pressed together. "She's useless," one merchant spat, rattling the bars. "She doesn't talk, doesn't fight, doesn't even cry. What will anyone do with her?" Buyers laughed and moved on. One man joked, "Maybe she's already broken." Another sneered, "Or maybe she's dumb." But the girl remained quiet, her eyes lowered. Her silence only made her look more strange, more mysterious. Then came a human, a middle-aged man in simple clothes. His hands carried small scars, the kind earned in kitchens from sharp knives and hot pans. He was not rich, not powerful, and no one understood why he walked straight to her cage. The merchant rushed to him, eagerly. "Not this one, sir. Look around. Strong fighters, pretty entertainers, loyal workers, but this one, she doesn't talk. She won't obey." The human ignored him. He crouched in front of the cage. His eyes studied the girl. She finally looked up, just for a second. Their eyes met. There was no fear, no hope, only emptiness. "What's her price?" the human asked. The merchant blinked, then grinned. "For her? Practically nothing. I'll give her cheap, but you'll regret it. She's broken." Coins clinked, the cage opened, chains were unlocked. The girl stepped out slowly, almost like she expected to be. "It," the crowd muttered in confusion. "Why waste money on that one?" someone whispered. The human placed a cloak over her shoulders, protecting her from the cold night wind. He said nothing. She said nothing. Together they walked away from the noise, the lights, the stairs. On the journey back, the silence grew, heavier. The girl waited for the pain she thought would come. The human did not strike her, did not shout at her. He simply walked, his steps calm, as if carrying home a guest, not a slave. Finally, they reached his small home. It was not rich or fancy, just a warm place with a wooden table, hanging pots, and the smell of spices. The girl froze at the doorway. It felt too safe, too unreal. "You don't talk much, do you?" the human said, softly, not expecting an answer. The girl lowered her head, afraid. But then he pointed at the kitchen. "Can you cook?" Her eyes widened. No one had ever asked her that. No one had ever asked her anything. Slowly, she nodded. Her voice cracked from disuse, barely a whisper. "I can." The human smiled faintly, as if he already knew. "Then cook. This is your place now, no chains, no orders, just food." She hesitated, waiting for the trap, waiting for laughter, but there was none. He stepped aside, letting her touch the kitchen. Her hands trembled as she picked up a knife. The smell of fresh herbs and raw vegetables filled her senses. For the first time in years, she felt something other than fear. Something, small, fragile, but real hope. And as she placed the first cut into the vegetable, the human watched her quietly, thinking, "She is not broken. She is only silent." The night outside was filled with chaos, but inside that little kitchen, a new story was beginning, one neither of them yet understood. The silent stranger had entered, his home, and with her, a secret that would change both their lives forever. The kitchen was warm, filled with the soft crackle of fire. The human sat at the wooden table, watching the silent girl move slowly among the pots and pans. She looked unsure, like every step might be a mistake. Her hands trembled as she touched the knife. But when she began to cut, her movements grew, steady, almost graceful. The human leaned back in his chair, curious. He had spent years cooking meals for travelers, soldiers, and merchants. He knew the difference between clumsy hands and skilled ones. This girl, she had skill, hidden beneath her silence. The smell of garlic and herbs soon filled the room. The sound of vegetables sizzling against hot oil spread through the air. The human closed his eyes for a moment, breathing it in. It reminded him of home, of nights when life was simple. The girl placed the dish in front of him, not saying a word. She stood frozen, waiting for anger, waiting for insults, because that was all she had ever known. But the man picked up his fork, took a bite, and smiled. "It's good," he said, his voice calm. "Very good." Her lips parted, just slightly, as if she wanted to speak. But no sound came. Instead, she looked away, her silver eyes reflecting the firelight. He ate slowly, enjoying every bite. "You don't have to be afraid here," he added. "I didn't bring you for pain. I brought you for this." He gestured at the food. "For cooking?" The girl's hands tightened against her cloak. She wanted to believe him, but deep inside a voice whispered that nothing kind lasted. She had seen kindness before. Always a mask for cruelty. Still, something about this man felt different. After the meal, he stood and walked to the window. The night outside was quiet. The stars scattered across the sky. "What should I call you?" he asked softly. The girl lowered her gaze. Her throat tightened. She had a name once, long ago. But it had been beaten out of her, stolen with the rest of her past. She shook her head. "No name?" he asked, his tone gentle, not mocking. "Then until you wish to tell me, I'll call you stranger." Her chest tightened. The word felt strange, but not cruel. He turned back and gave her a small smile. "Stranger in my kitchen, stranger. In my home, welcome." For the first time, she felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. She did not smile. She did not speak. But something in her silence had changed. The next morning, the man woke early, as always, but found her already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Steam rose from the pot. The smell of bread baking filled the small house. She moved quietly, yet with purpose, like someone who belonged there. "You work fast," he said, washing his hands. "Careful. People might think you've lived here forever." She blinked at him, unsure if he was joking, then returned to her cooking, but her movements softened, less tense. That day, he invited her to sit and eat with him. At first, she refused, standing by the corner like a servant, but he pulled out the chair. "This table has room for two," he said. "You are not my servant, you are my cook, and cooks eat with those they feed." Slowly, she sat, her eyes lowered. But when she tasted the bread she made, her shoulders relaxed just a little. Days passed, each one adding a small piece of trust between them. She still spoke little, but her silence no longer felt empty. It felt steady, almost peaceful. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, he said, "I will open my kitchen to more people soon, travelers, neighbors, maybe even strangers from the market. Will you help me?" Her hands froze. Fear rushed back. The idea of facing people, of being seen, terrified her. But he noticed, and placed a hand on the table, steady and calm. "Only if you wish." She hesitated, then nodded slowly, not because she was ready, but because something inside her wanted to try. That night she sat by the fire, her eyes watching the flames dance. She thought of chains, of cold cages, of cruel hands. And then she thought of warm bread, of herbs and oil, of the human's voice saying, "Welcome." For the first time in years, she closed her eyes, not in fear, but in rest. And somewhere deep inside her heart, a thought whispered, perhaps this invitation was not a trap, perhaps it was the beginning of a home. The sun was low when the man returned from the market, his arms filled with baskets of vegetables, grains, and a small cut of meat. He placed them on the wooden counter. The kitchen suddenly felt alive. The girl stood nearby, her silver eyes, watching quietly. "This will be your first real test," he said with a faint smile. "Cook us a meal, not just for me, but for the neighbors too." Her heart stopped. Neighbors? She had only cooked for him, hidden away in safety. Now strangers would taste her food, judge her worth. The thought made her hands cold. She shook her head slowly, fear rising in her chest. But the man placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and calm. "Don't be afraid. I trust you. If you can cook for me, You can cook for them. The girl looked at the ingredients. Her mind raced with old memories, back when she was younger. Before the chains, she had cooked for her family. Food was her only gift to them. Food was how she spoke without words. Taking a slow breath, she began. Her hands moved with skill. Chopping, grinding, mixing herbs with oil. Flames leapt under the pan. The smell filled the air. And soon the small house was heavy with warmth and spice. The man watched her carefully. He could see how her silence changed. Here in the kitchen, she wasn't empty, she was alive. Each cut of the knife, each pinch of spice was a language only she understood. By evening, the table was set with bowls of steaming stew, fresh bread, roasted vegetables, and a golden brown meat dish. The human stepped outside and called his neighbors. Curiosity brought them, men and women who often mocked him for buying the silent alien girl. They gathered at his table, whispering, "What is this? Why call us here?" The girl froze when she saw them enter. Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to hide, to vanish. But the man gave her a small nod, reassuring, "Stay, let them see." One by one, the neighbors sat, uncertain but hungry. The man served them, placing the girl's dishes before them. Silence filled the room as spoons dipped. Bites were taken. And then, something changed. The first man who tasted the stew looked up in surprise. This is good." Another broke the bread and gasped. "Soft, warm, perfect." A woman who tried the roasted vegetables smiled. "Better than the food at the market tavern." The whispers turned into low murmurs of approval. People ate quickly, hungrily, some even asking for seconds. The girl stood by the fire, her heart racing. She didn't believe what she was hearing. She had expected laughter, insults, rejection, but instead she saw eyes widen with joy, smiles forming, plates emptying. The human leaned back in his chair, watching it all. Then he spoke. "This food was made by her." He pointed gently at the girl. "The one you all called useless, broken, silent. Tonight she fed you better than any tavern in this town." The neighbors glanced at her, their faces shifting from doubt to wonder. Some nodded, some avoided her gaze out of shame, but none could deny the truth. She lowered her eyes, unable to handle their stares, but deep inside, a flame of pride flickered for the first time. When the guests finally left, full and satisfied, the human closed the door and looked at her. "You see? You are not broken. Your hands can do more than chains ever allowed." Her lips trembled. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but fear held her tongue. Still her eyes shone in the firelight, and for the first time he saw not emptiness but life. That night. She cleaned the dishes with quiet care. Her mind replayed the sounds of praise, the smell of food, the warmth of people eating together. It felt like music, music she hadn't heard in years. Later she sat by the window, the stars above watching silently. She thought of her old world, her family, the times when food meant love, not survival. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent, but not bitter. They were tears of remembering. The man noticed but said nothing. He let her cry because some chains were not made of iron, some were made of pain, and pain needed time to break. In that quiet moment, the girl realized something. Food was not just survival. It was freedom. It was her voice, and tonight she had spoken louder than words ever could. And though her lips stayed sealed, in her heart she whispered, "Maybe I am not a stranger anymore." Days turned into weeks, and the little kitchen became more alive than ever before. Every morning the smell of fresh bread floated through the streets, drawing curious noses toward the human's home. Neighbors who once mocked him now lingered at his door, hoping for a taste of the food cooked by the silent alien girl. The girl no longer hid in corners. Though her lips still spoke few words, her hands told stories every day, kneading dough, stirring pots, roasting meat until it glowed golden. Each dish carried a piece of her heart, though no one could see it. The human noticed the change. She still walked softly, still lowered her gaze. But there was something different in her silence now. It was not emptiness, it was calm. One evening, after closing the door behind the last neighbor, he sat at the table and said, "You've turned this house into more than a kitchen. You've turned it into a place people feel welcome." The girl stood by the fire, wiping her hands on a cloth. She looked at him for a long moment. Her lips parted, a sound almost formed, but instead she gave a small nod, her silver eyes softer than before. The man smiled faintly. "That's enough. I don't need your words. I can hear you in the food." Her chest tightened at his kindness. She had always believed silence was weakness, yet he made it sound like strength. The next morning, the market was busy. People spoke of the human's home as if it were already a small tavern. Some said, "The girl's cooking is worth more than gold." Others whispered, "She must be gifted, maybe even touched by spirits." When the human returned home, he brought her a gift, a small set of spices from another town, rare and costly. "These are for you," he said, placing the jars in her hands. "For your dishes." She looked at him in shock. No one had ever given her a gift before, not since her family. Her hands trembled. For a moment she thought she might cry, but instead, she placed the spices carefully on the shelf, treating them like treasure. That evening, she used them for the first time. The food that came from her hands carried such rich flavor that the man laughed out loud after the first bite. "If word spreads, we will have to build a bigger table," he said, wiping his mouth. The girl gave the smallest smile, almost hidden, but it was there, quick as a flicker of light. Later that night, while washing the dishes, she remembered something from long ago. Her little brother smiling when she gave him a bowl of soup, her mother kissing her forehead after a meal, her father saying, "You cook with love, little one." The memories made her hands shake, but they did not hurt as much as before. Now they mixed with the present, with the human who gave her space to cook without fear. Soon, children from the neighborhood began to sneak into the kitchen, watching her work. One boy asked shyly, "Can you teach me how to make bread?" She froze, uncertain, but the man chuckled. "Go on, show him, you'll do fine." Slowly, she guided the boy's small hands through the dough. He laughed when flour dusted his face. She almost laughed too, though no sound escaped her lips. Her heart felt strangely light. Word spread faster than ever. Travelers came to the house, offering coins for a meal. The human accepted only enough to keep the kitchen running. "This is not a business," he told them. "This is a home." She cooks for family, not for profit, but family. That word echoed in the girl's heart. She had not thought of herself as part of a family in so long. Yet when she served food to strangers who left smiling, when she saw children lick their fingers happily, she felt something warm, something alive. One evening, after the guests had left, the man poured 2 cups of tea and set one in front of her. "You've given me more than food," he said, looking into the fire. "You've given me company. I was alone before, but not anymore." Her eyes widened, her breath caught. No one had ever said such words to her, not since she lost everything. She touched the cup of tea with trembling fingers, lifting it slowly to her lips. For the first time in many years, she did not feel like a stranger. She felt like she belonged. But in the shadows outside, 2 men watched from a distance, their eyes sharp, their whispers dark. "That's the girl, isn't it? The one we sold, the one who escaped us." The warmth inside the house grew brighter, but danger was already moving closer, unseen. The girl slept that night with the softest expression she had ever worn, unaware that the peace she had begun to build was about to be tested. The days of warmth did not erase the scars of the past. The silent girl still woke in the middle of the night, her chest tight, her breath shallow. She would sit by the fire, staring at the flames as if they could burn away her memories. The human noticed he would find her awake, pale eyes fixed on nothing, her hands trembling as if holding invisible chains. One night he asked softly, "What do you see when you stare into the fire?" She didn't answer, but her silence was heavier than before. Her lips pressed tightly together, her body curled as if bracing for a blow. He didn't push her. He only said, "One day when you are ready, tell me." But the past was not content to stay hidden. It was creeping closer, waiting outside in the shadows. 2 men entered the town late one evening, cloaks covering their faces. They moved quietly, whispering to merchants, asking questions. "Have you seen a silver-eyed slave?" Girl, small, silent, stubborn? One merchant nodded slowly. She was sold cheap, useless thing. A human bought her. The men's faces twisted into cruel smiles. Then she belongs to us still, one hissed. We will take her back. Meanwhile, inside the kitchen, the girl tried to pretend she was fine. She cooked. She cleaned. She watched the children laugh, but deep in her heart, fear had never left. One night she found the courage to speak. Her voice cracked like old wood, barely above a whisper. They hurt me. The human froze. The words were the first he had heard from her beyond simple answers. He looked at her, eyes steady. Who hurt you? She hesitated, her throat tightened, the memories flooded back. Dark rooms, iron chains, mocking voices, the sting of whips. The endless orders to work, to serve, to be silent. My own kind sold me first, she whispered. Then others bought me. They called me weak because I didn't fight. They said my silence was useless. Her voice broke. Tears filled her eyes. They tried to break me, but I stayed quiet. I thought if I made no sound, they couldn't take more. The human's jaw tightened, his fist clenched on the table. No one will hurt you here, he said firmly. Not again. Her eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for hidden cruelty, but she found only fire in his words, a fire that promised protection. Still fear whispered in her heart. They will come. They always come. The next day, while she was preparing food, she caught sight of two men at the far end of the market, their cloaks drawn, their eyes fixed on her. Her blood ran cold. The knife almost slipped from her hand. She turned quickly, retreating back to the safety of the kitchen. But her hands would not stop shaking. The human noticed immediately. What's wrong? He asked. She did not speak. She only pointed toward the window where the shadows of those men still lingered. The human went outside, his eyes hard, but by the time he reached the street they were gone. Only the echo of their footsteps remained. That night he placed extra wood on the fire, keeping it burning bright as if the light could push away the darkness outside. He looked at her and said, You are not alone anymore. If your past comes, it will face me too. The girl sat quietly, staring at the flames again. But her silence was different. It was not empty despair. It was the heavy silence of someone, holding secrets too sharp to share all at once. Later, when she finally lay down to rest, she dreamed of the chains, the mocking laughter, the merchants who called her worthless. But she also dreamed of the human's kitchen, of bread rising in the oven, of children smiling. Between nightmare and hope she drifted, caught between two worlds. Outside, in the cold night, the two men whispered in the dark alley, We will strike soon. The girl cannot hide forever, and though the fire inside the house burned strong, the storm of her past was moving closer, ready to test everything she had begun to build. The morning began quietly. The smell of baking bread filled the kitchen. The girl moved gracefully from pot to pot, her hands steady, her silence calm. For a moment it felt as if the past had lost its grip, but peace rarely lasts. Outside the house, two figures stood in the shadows, their eyes sharp, their whispers poisonous. That's her, one muttered, the silent one, the useless one who slipped away. She doesn't belong here, the other growled. She belongs to us, she is property. Inside, the human sensed something wrong. Years of hardship had sharpened his instincts. He looked out the window, and though the men disappeared into the crowd, he felt their eyes, watching, waiting. When he turned back, the girl was staring at him, her hands frozen above the dough. She had felt it too. Her body trembled, her lips pressed tight. They're here, aren't they? She whispered, her first words in days. The man nodded slowly. Yes, but they won't take you, not while I live. Her eyes widened at his certainty. She wanted to believe him, but fear clawed at her chest. She knew those men. She knew what they were capable of. That evening, as they sat by the fire, the knock came, loud and demanding. The girl's heart jumped. Her body curled as if the chains had returned. The man stood, steady as stone, and opened the door. Two cloaked men stepped inside, their smiles sharp, their voices oily. "We've come for what is ours," one said, pointing at the girl. "She was sold, and she remains our property." "She's not property," the man said coldly. "She's free," the men laughed, the sound cruel. "Free? Do you think a few loaves of bread can buy freedom?" She was marked as worthless, and worthless things cannot belong to themselves. The girl shrank back against the wall, the firelight flickering across her pale face, her breath shallow. The human stepped closer, his fists clenched. "She belongs here in this kitchen, in this home, not in your cages." The men's eyes hardened. One leaned forward, his hand on his blade. "Then you stand in our way, human, and men who stand in our way do not live long." Tension filled the room, the crackle of the fire the only sound. The girl's chest heaved. Every instinct told her to stay silent, to hide, to let the world crush her again. But the man's voice broke through the fear, firm and unshaken. "You'll not touch her," the slavers snarled. "You cannot protect her forever." And with that they turned and left, their footsteps heavy against the dirt road. But their threat lingered like smoke in the air. When the door closed, the girl slid to the floor, her knees weak, tears spilling down her cheeks. "They will come back," she whispered. "They always come back." The man knelt beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Then let them come. They will not find the same broken girl they left. They will find you and me together." She looked at him, her lips trembling, her voice breaking. "I am not strong. I am not brave." "You are stronger than you know," he said gently. "Your silence survived what their cruelty could not. That is strength." That night, he placed extra locks on the doors, set traps along the back path, and kept his knife by his bed. The girl could not sleep. She sat by the fire again, clutching her cloak, but when she looked at him sharpening his blade in the flickering light, she felt something she had not felt in years: safety. The next day, neighbors gathered. Word of the strangers had spread. One man said, "We saw them near the tavern asking questions." Another whispered, "They planned something." The human nodded, his eyes calm but fierce. "If they come, they will find us ready." The girl listened, her chest tight. She had never been defended before, never been seen as worth fighting for. Her past had always taught her to stay silent, to endure, but now someone stood beside her unafraid. As the sun set, the town grew tense, shadows lengthened. Every creak of the floor made her flinch, but the human's steady presence kept her from falling apart. In the silence of the night, she whispered to herself, words so soft they barely left her lips. "Maybe I am not worthless." But outside, in the darkness, the slavers sharpened their knives and plotted their return. The threat had not ended. It had only begun. The next morning dawned heavy with silence. The town felt tense, as if it too waited for a storm. Inside the small kitchen, the girl's hands moved quickly, chopping vegetables, stirring broth, kneading dough. She cooked not only to feed, but to steady her racing heart. The human watched her, his jaw set. He knew the slavers would return, and soon. But he also knew something else. The town had tasted her food. They had felt her presence. She was no longer invisible, no longer a stranger. By midday, the house smelled of roasted meat, warm bread and herbs. Neighbors peeked through the windows, drawn by the scent. The human opened the door wide. "Come in," he said. "Sit at the table." Confused, they entered one by one, filling the small house. Bowls and plates were set before them. The girl moved among them with quiet grace, serving food. Her silver eyes lowered, but her hands steady. As the first bites were taken, murmurs of delight spread, the stew rich, the bread soft, the vegetables glowing with flavor. The neighbors smiled, laughing, asking for seconds, the kitchen filled with life. But then, the door slammed open. The two slavers stormed in, their eyes sharp, their voices venom. "Enough games," one spat. "She is ours. She comes with us now." The laughter died. Silence fell. The girl froze, her hands trembling around the ladle. The old fear returned, chains in her memory tightened. The human stood, his voice firm. "She is not yours. She never was. She is free." The slavers sneered. "You think you can decide that? She is property, nothing more." But before the human could answer, one of the neighbors spoke. She fed my children. Another added, "She gave us warmth when we had none." An older woman said firmly, "She is no slave. She is family." The slavers blinked, taken aback. The room that once would have turned away now stood united, dozens of eyes staring at them with anger. The human stepped forward, his voice steady as stone. "You called her worthless, but she has done more for this town with silence and food than you ever did with chains and cruelty. Leave before you find yourselves outnumbered." The slavers glanced around, seeing the fire in every face, the weight of the town against them. Their sneers faltered, one spat on the floor. "This isn't over," he hissed, and they stormed out into the street, swallowed by the crowd's hatred. The girl's knees weakened. She nearly dropped the ladle, but the human caught her gently, steadying her. "It's over for today," he whispered, "and one day soon, it will be over forever." Tears filled her eyes, but these were not the tears of fear. They were of relief, of release. She looked around the room, at the neighbors smiling, at the children licking their fingers, at the human who stood like a wall against the storm. That night, after everyone had gone, the kitchen still smelled of bread and spice. The girl sat at the table, her cloak loose around her shoulders. For the first time, she let herself speak. "More than a few words, they always told me. I was nothing." Her voice was soft, but it did not break. "But tonight, I saw I am not nothing." The human smiled, weary but warm. "You are far from nothing. You are the reason this home has life again." She lowered her gaze, then lifted it again, and for the first time since he had met her, she gave him a true smile, small but bright, shining through years of silence. Days passed and the kitchen grew busier. Travelers came not just for food, but for the story of the silent girl who cooked with magic in her hands. Coins filled the jar by the door. Children learned to knead dough at her side. Neighbors brought gifts of spices and fresh produce. And slowly, the girl began to speak more. Not much, but enough. A word here, a whisper there. Her voice cracked and soft, but real. Every word a victory. One evening, as the fire crackled and the smell of fresh stew filled the room, the human raised his cup. "To freedom," he said, his eyes on her. She hesitated, then lifted her own cup, her lips forming the words softly. "To freedom." The chains of the past had not vanished completely, but they no longer owned her. She was no longer a silent stranger in a cage. She was a cook, a friend, a part of something bigger. And as she stirred the pot one last time that night, she thought, "This is not just his kitchen anymore, it is ours."